In 1982, a little girl and her dog were home alone for the very first time. That night, she sat on the couch watching the evening news when a headline made her blood run cold. A serial killer was on the loose, and he'd been spotted in her area. Panicked, she ran through the house, checking every door, every window, twisting each lock twice just to be sure. But in her rush, she forgot one, the small window in the basement. Later that night, she crawled into bed. Her dog, as always, curled up beneath it. The sound of his breathing comforted her, and soon she drifted off to sleep. Sometime after midnight, a strange sound woke her. It was faint, like water running from the bathroom faucet. Still half asleep, she reached her hand down and felt a warm, wet lick against her fingers, and lay there for a moment, listening to the dripping continue. Quick pause. If you'd like to support me a bit extra, there's a subscription in my bio. I would really appreciate it, and it genuinely helps me focus on making more videos for you. But curiosity got the best of her. She got up, crossed the dark hallway, and pushed open the bathroom door. The light flickered on. Her heart stopped. Her dog was hanging from the shower, its throat slit open, blood dripping into the tub below. She stumbled back in shock, then caught her reflection in the mirror, and on the glass, written in something dark and red, were the words, "People can lick too."
You might not see me post ever again. My videos weren't fake.
He's dead now from natural causes. The case of Andrew Dawson will never sit right with me. If you don't know about him, let's get into it. I'm gonna give you a Reader's Digest on the creepiest thing I've seen on the internet thus far. This man was driving on a long road one day. He sees something like a very tall, large figure moving on a mountain. He starts recording. He's like, oh my gosh, it's a giant. Everybody's like, wow, go back, because it went absolutely viral. He goes back and he starts seeing like government whirlybirds there, and it's like, whoa, what's going on? And an agent tells him, hey, you can't be here. He goes. Long story short, he starts seeing unmarked vehicles following him, staking out his house at night. All of this is live on the internet. Mind you, you can look up Andrew Dawson on TikTok. It's still all up, but the comments I think are disabled, maybe. Then not too long after that, he puts up this video where he looks like really uncomfortable. He's like, hey guys, just want to let you know everything that I posted was fake. Then he posted that video that you just saw a little while after, saying, you may not see me posting for a while, but nothing I said was fake. It was all real, essentially. He does one more video the day after showing that there's a military building where the giant was on top of that mountain. And then after that, no one hears from him. Months later, people find his public obituary on the internet. Y'all cannot tell me that that is not connected. You cannot tell me. And I feel like they didn't take the videos down because that would just be way too sus. And I think that his wife turned off the comments because they asked her to. We would have to do a whole other video diving into the wife and like what's probably happening with her. Anyway, as always, make sure you like and follow and comment down below if you want a part 2.
People thought this was just a normal makeup tutorial until she started hitting her head repeatedly onto the table. In 2014, a YouTube channel uploaded a strange video titled Party Makeup by Nikki. First, the video seemed completely normal. A girl named Nikki is sitting in front of the camera explaining how she does her makeup before going to a party. She's cheerful, smiling, and talking to the audience just like any other typical beauty tutorial on YouTube. Then something strange starts to happen. On the left side of the screen, random images start appearing. They look like screenshots from Facebook, almost like someone is scrolling through Facebook. Then it cuts to CCTV footage showing a dark, empty room. First, Nikki is continuing smiling and doing her tutorial like nothing is happening. Then all of a sudden, her expression changes. Nikki goes from happy and upbeat to completely serious, staring straight ahead with a blank expression on her face. Then without warning, she begins slamming her head onto the table over and over again. It's a red substance mess, and then the video ends. This YouTube video spread across the internet pretty fast, and many people were left confused and disturbed. Many people were left wondering, is this woman okay? Was she possessed somehow? Or was this entire thing fake? Yes, the video was fake, and the woman in the video is actress Nakia Seacrest, and she is okay. It was simply a short horror skit created to look like a real YouTube tutorial. Even though the video was completely staged, it still creeped out a lot of people because it felt so realistic. And to this day, Party Makeup by Nikki is still shared as one of the scariest videos uploaded to YouTube.
A new scan of the Titanic just came out, and it's actually changing a lot about what we thought we knew about the night it sank. So this is the first ever full view of the Titanic sitting at the bottom of the ocean, and it was made by robots that took 700,000 photos and put them together for this 3D model. The images were put together for this National Geographic documentary, but once they started looking at the pictures, they were like, whoa, this is actually different than what we thought. Some of the images were of stuff they had never seen before, like this is a window, and they believed that the glass was broken by the iceberg. But then they got to this image, which is of the boiler room, and they noticed something. According to this image, one of the boat's steam valves was left open as it sank. And maybe it doesn't sound like it's a big deal, but that means that someone was operating the boiler room as the boat was sinking, and that was not believed to be true. For the longest time, it was believed that the lights on the Titanic went out while it was sinking. Even though eyewitnesses remembered the lights being on as it sank, they were basically told they were crazy and that was impossible. But now we have a scan showing that the boiler room was operating as the boat was sinking, meaning that the lights were on while it was sinking. They were also able to make a model of where the iceberg hit the boat, and they realized that the iceberg was making contact with the boat for 6.3 seconds, which was previously unknown. And also the contact it made was relatively shallow. It was not these huge gashes that tore the boat apart.
There's a reason that she is considered to be the most dangerous woman in English criminal history, and why she will never be released from prison. I'm True Crime Caitlin, and this is serial killer Joanne Dennehy. This is a shorter version of this case. To hear a fuller deep dive, head over to the True Crime with Caitlin podcast, available wherever you stream. Joanne Dennehy was a very well-known career criminal who was dependent on drugs, alcohol, and struggled with her mental health. At only 15 years old, she would run away from home to be with her 21-year-old boyfriend, who she went on to have 2 daughters with. Joanne spent many years going in and out of prison for several different charges, including theft, burglary, assault, and drug charges. When she was released from prison in 2013, she was given a room to live in rent-free by landlord Kevin Lee, who she had begun a sexual relationship with. On the 19th of March 2013, Joanne would lure Polish immigrant Lucas Slabowski to her flat at Rolleston Garth, Peterborough. The two had only known each other for a few days, and Lucas believed that he was in a relationship with Joanne, and he was so happy about it. He even texted one of his friends saying life is beautiful. After luring Lucas to her flat, Joanne would blindfold him and then launched a vicious attack on him, stabbing him in the chest, piercing his heart, and killing him. This was her very first murder, and she sickeningly had a goal that she wanted to murder 9 men, and just days later she would take another life. She would arrive to the room of John Chapman just over a week later. John was alcohol dependent, and Joanne used the ruse of drinking together to get John to not only open his door to her, but allow her inside of his room. John and Joanne didn't see eye to eye, and she had actually already made threats towards John, and he would call her the crazy woman. But with alcohol in hand, he allowed her inside. After getting so drunk that he passed out, Joanne would begin a fatal, frenzied attack on him. She would stab him so severely in the neck that she severed his carotid artery, and then stabbed him in the chest 5 times. The bodies of Lucas and John would be dumped in the nearby Thorny Dyke ditch, and Joanne would enlist the help of her friend Gary Stretch Richards, who, by the way, was 7'3" tall. He was a literal giant. On the 30th of March 2013, police in Peterborough would receive a chilling phone call. Someone was reporting that they had just discovered a body in a ditch in the Newborough area. When officers arrived, they would discover the body of Kevin Lee. He was dressed only in a women's black sequin dress, and his body was discovered in a posed position, one where his naked behind was up in the air and his face was in the ground. Kevin Lee, a very beloved married father, had been sadistically stabbed to death, and extensive wounds on his arms and hands showed that he had tried to fight for his life. Where Kevin was found was quite a remote area, and so there was no CCTV cameras or anything like that for the police to comb through. So they decided to pull all of the data from a nearby phone tower. Alongside searching through Kevin's phone records, what they would discover was that at least one other phone had done the exact same journey as Kevin, and that phone belonged to Joanne Dennehy. After the discovery and news broke of Kevin's murder, Joanne and Gary went on the run. They drove 140 miles from Peterborough to Hereford, but Joanne still wasn't done. Here on the 2nd of April, she would launch another 2 horrific stabbing attacks on 2 separate men who were literally just out and about, minding their own business, walking their dogs. To add insult to injury, she would actually kidnap one of the dogs. Robin Barraza and John Rogers, who were both victims of the attack, would thankfully survive their injuries. Joanne was apprehended soon after committing these attacks, and while getting booked into the prison, she compared committing murder to like going for a Sunday roast. She was shown absolutely no remorse and no sorry for what she had done. If anything, she was proud of it. The day after her arrest, the bodies of Lucas and John would be discovered in the Thorny Dyke ditch, and it didn't take much for them to link these murders to Joanne Dennehy. During her time on remand while awaiting trial, she would be placed into solitary confinement for 2 years. This is after a prison officer discovered that Joanne had made a detailed escape plan. She wanted to cut off one of the fingers of one of the female prison guards and use this to overpass the biometric system within the prison. That's how she was going to escape. It came as a huge shock to everyone in the courtroom when Joanne Dennehy pled guilty to all of her charges. This was 3 charges of murder and 2 charges of attempted murder. For this, she would be slapped with the ultimate sentence. She was handed a whole life order, meaning that she will never be released from prison. She will spend the rest of her natural life behind bars. To hear this case in more fuller detail, head over to the True Crime with Caitlin podcast, where this episode has just gone live.
Another female serial killer, and actually the last female serial killer of this entire series. Every single state has had at least one serial killer, if not multiple, and this series is almost done, and in it I've covered multiple different women. Today I'm going to tell you guys about the worst serial killer from West Virginia, and we know that female serial killers are only about 16% of all serial killers, and many times they work alongside men or their accomplices, and so it's not common to have just a solo female serial killer, but in West Virginia they had one, and she was absolutely terrible. If you're new here, this is a map of all the states I've covered. I think in this series we've covered 2 other people that are very similar to her, where they were like nurses and they killed their patients. One was called the Angel of Death. And this girl that I'm about to tell you about was also a nurse, and she also killed her patients. She specifically targeted elderly veteran patients. Today I'm going to be telling you guys about Retta Mays. And this was actually pretty recent. So Retta was born in West Virginia in 1975 and was in the Army National Guard for a while, and then she was deployed to Iraq and Kuwait, so some pretty intense places to be deployed. After her service, she ended up working as a corrections officer at a jail for a while, and actually it's reported, and there was some sort of like lawsuit or trial or something that never fully went to completion, because allegedly she was being beaten regularly by one of the inmates at this corrections facility. Years later, in June of 2015, she ends up becoming a nursing assistant at the Lewis A. Johnson Veterans Medical Center. Now, how she got the job is beyond me. Clearly someone dropped the ball, they didn't do a good enough job, because Retta was unqualified for this job, and that is the understatement of a century. She didn't have any certification or license to care for a single patient, and yet somehow she's hired. She had no training. She was not authorized to be giving medications, but somehow was doing that all the time. And then 2 years into her job, again, no qualifications, and somehow she's there for 2 years already. She ends up getting assigned to the surgical wing of this hospital. After she starts working at the surgical wing at this hospital, people start suddenly having really weird things happening. A lot of elderly patients start suffering from mysterious drops in their blood sugar levels, and for many, it's killing them. No one knows why it's happening. Over the course of 11 months, at least 11 people have died due to hypoglycemia, which is very low blood sugar. And many of them were not insulin dependent. That's not how anyone would have expected them to pass. That's not a normal thing. So people working there are alarmed and terrified and confused, and at one point there's even an internal investigation at the hospital to figure it out, because one patient, his name was Archie Edgell, he was 84 years old, he was a Korean War veteran, he was hospitalized there, and then he all of a sudden ends up having a drop in his blood sugar, and it goes to 24. And by the way, in case you don't know anything about blood sugar or insulin or anything like that, Anything less than 70 is considered a low blood sugar level. Anything less than 55 is considered dangerously low. If it's less than 40, you're likely to go into a coma. Sometimes people have like extreme confusion and seizures before that. His blood sugar level was below 24. He almost dies. Somehow the hospital staff ends up saving him and he survives. However, a few days later, after this, he ends up dying from the same thing happening again. And both times they have no idea why. It shouldn't have happened. He wasn't insulin dependent. His blood sugar should not have dropped like that, and they can't figure out why. And his body is sent for an autopsy. And this is when they discovered that he was injected 4 different times with insulin. And they are like, why? Who is doing that? That should not be happening. So at the time, this internal investigation is happening, but they don't really get any answers, unfortunately. In 2018, Retta ends up being fired, and it sounds like it's unrelated to this. I don't think they suspected her, or maybe they did, but they didn't have enough to fire her. I think she was fired just for other reasons. But just so you know, while she was working at this ward, in this wing of the hospital, in the surgical wing, a total of 112 patients died. Of those deaths, 66 of them experienced hypoglycemic events. It's thought that she potentially killed as many as 112 people, but kind of at minimum, it's thought she killed at least 66 of them. That is so many people. All older, elderly people who served our country. They're veterans. They are coming in for other things, and then they're dying from low blood sugar when that wasn't even an issue that they were dealing with. Eventually, the FBI ends up getting involved. They actually questioned her a couple times. She was questioned in that internal investigation into the hospital, and then she's questioned by the FBI. And they questioned her a couple times, and she denies any involvement. However, at some point, they're like, we're pretty sure it's Retta, and they start to build a case against her. So they realize that she's regularly searching female serial killers on her phone. She is constantly watching the Netflix series Nurses That Kill, and one episode literally focused on insulin injections being the reason that people were dying. And that is how most of the people that died in her hospital were killed. Plus, they were able to access her phone calls to her husband, who was in prison for child-related charges. So she's calling him multiple times to complain about her job. At one point, she says that she wants to strangle her patients. She says that she's sore from trying to resuscitate a patient and that she wished they would have just had a DNR, which is do not resuscitate. But if they had done a DNR, she wouldn't have had to touch him, and he would have just slipped into a coma and died once his blood sugar hit a certain level. Basically implying that she injected him and was just waiting for him to die. The investigation, in the end, having more than 300 interviews with her, with other people, witnesses, family members, everything. They reviewed the phone calls, her social media, her computer records, and she was not good at hiding what she was doing, and so they had lots of evidence against her. Between forensic experts, endocrinologists, which are people who would know what is going on with insulin and blood sugar and all these different things, and they ended up exhuming some of the bodies, some of the believed victims. They look at hospital records, they look at the visitor logs, they look at literally everything they possibly could have. And finally, they announced in 2019 that they have a persons of interest. Finally, in 2020, Retta Mays is their suspect, their main only suspect. And she has been for quite a while. They just didn't announce it right away as they were building this case against her. In 2020, she is caught, arrested, and charged. She was charged with 7 life terms plus 20 years. Even though they believe she actually killed many more people, like I said, anywhere from 66 to upwards of 112 people, with the potential even for more that we don't know about. She is still alive and incarcerated to this day. Right now, she's incarcerated in Alabama. Unfortunately, we don't have confirmation of all the people she would have killed. It would be hard to go back and figure out if someone died from natural causes or from her killing them. It's hard to tell years later. However, we do know that in 2017, she killed Archie Edgold, the first man I was telling you about. And then a few months later, on July 19th or 20th of 2017, she killed Robert Edge Sr., who was a Navy veteran of the Korean War. And then she killed, in January of 2018, Robert Kuzel, who was 89, and he was also a veteran of the Korean War. On March 25th or 26th, she killed George Shaw Sr. He was 81, and he was an Air Force veteran. On April 3rd or 4th, she killed William Holloway, who was 96, and he was a U.S. Army veteran of World War II. And then a few days later, she killed Felix McDermott, who was 82, and he was a veteran of the Vietnam War. And then on June 3rd or 4th, she killed Raymond Goldman, who was 88, and he was a veteran of the Army and the Air Force, and he served in the Korean War and the Vietnam War. And finally, she killed Russell R. Posey Sr. He was 92 years old. He was a U.S. Navy veteran of World War II. The medical examiner was not able to conclusively confirm that insulin that she had injected him with was the direct cause of his death. So they actually had charged her with 8 counts of murder, but she was only sentenced to 7 because he's the one that they couldn't conclusively prove. But she was charged for 1 count of assault and intent to commit murder in connection to his death. In total, like I said, she probably killed way more people, and she ended up having this sob story saying she felt so bad for the family's victims and she's so sorry and yada 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 in trial, but I just don't believe her. She was a horrible person, clearly. She not only murdered people, she didn't care what her husband did either. And so just a terrible, evil person. She was preying on elderly people who served our country, elderly people who were coming for care in their final years, and she killed them, and that's horrible.
So you have 9 people at this drug and alcohol fueled party at this famous celebrity's house in England, and by the end of the night, one of the partygoers is found dead, floating face up in the pool. He had injuries to his face and neck like he was suffocated, and evidence shows that he had severe injuries consistent with being SA'd. Yet police initially said that he just accidentally drowned, that no foul play was involved, even though the celebrity who held the party reportedly removed items from his home prior to the paramedics arriving, like a pool thermometer and a broken handle to a shed. This celebrity has since gone on to continue his career in the public eye, even going on shows like Big Brother UK. He's even on TikTok ignoring comments that someone was murdered at his house 25 years ago. But so many people think that all 7 people who attended his party that night know exactly who killed this man. And since this is still unsolved, let's talk about it. This is Stuart Lubbock. He was only 31 years old when he suddenly and very mysteriously died in 2001. At the time of his death, Stuart had 2 young daughters and was living with his dad and brother in Harlow, Essex. Stuart was really close with his family, and he relied on them in the months before his death because he separated from his children's mother. Everyone who knew him said he was super social, loving, and just a really good and hardworking man. And by all accounts, he was just your typical 31-year-old man who was just trying to navigate life. That is, until March 30th, 2001. That night, Stuart and his older brother went out drinking at this really popular nightclub called the Millennium. It was a well-liked place in the community, but it wasn't a spot where you'd typically see celebrities. But that night, Stuart ran into one in the bathroom. This celebrity's name is Michael Barrymore, and Michael is a really famous UK TV presenter and comedian. He's hosted a lot of kids and comedy shows, but in 2001, he was just getting back to the height of his career. In 1995, Michael was doing a live show and announced that he was gay, which obviously isn't and shouldn't be a big deal. But at that time, he was married to a woman, and I guess his wife had no idea about his sexuality or that he was planning to announce it like that, so she said she felt blindsided. They ended up divorcing, but after this, Michael's career continued to thrive. So when Stuart saw him in the bathroom of this nightclub, he was so shocked and excited to be meeting a celebrity. So Michael and Stuart really hit it off, and Michael reportedly was giving him a lot of attention, which angered Michael's then boyfriend, John. John was also at the nightclub that night, and he was reportedly getting a little bit jealous over how much attention Michael was giving Stuart. They actually ended up getting in a fight over this in front of other people. This didn't seem to bother Michael though, and he wanted the party to continue. So he invited Stuart and 7 other people back to his mansion in Roydon. Not invited was Stuart's brother, which is odd, but Stuart really just wanted to go, so he didn't care. Of the people invited back, we know of some of their names: Stuart, Kylie Merritt and her brother Justin, 2 of Michael's friends who lived nearby, James Feuders and Simon Shaw, 1 underage girl and another 21-year-old girl, and then Michael's boyfriend John. And since Michael was a celebrity, they all excitedly accepted the offer and began heading out to his house. While his boyfriend was actually in the bathroom though, Michael and Stuart left together and took a taxi back to his house. And this also reportedly really angered his boyfriend. And when he finally caught up to them and got back to Michael's house, he was livid. They had yet another fight in front of people. But once that calmed down, the party continued and everyone was drinking and doing party drugs. Now, since Stuart left his brother behind, he didn't really know anyone at this party and probably felt kind of uncomfortable. He also usually didn't do drugs, but it's been reported that Michael was kind of insisting, and he was seen by many people at the party actually putting some cocaine on his finger and physically rubbing it on Stuart's gums. Then 4 a.m. hits, and Stuart, Michael's boyfriend John, and one other person were in the hot tub seemingly having a good time. But at this point, it was getting late, and some of the partygoers wanted to go home, so they all kind of split up. Some went inside the house to get dressed, which is where Michael said he went. But 30 minutes to an hour later, when he comes back outside, this is when he discovers a horrifying scene. There, floating face up in the pool and very obviously dead, is Stuart. When paramedics arrived, they found John, Michael's boyfriend, trying to do CPR on Stuart, but it was no use. He was declared dead almost immediately. The initial pathologist on the scene examined Stuart's body, and he said that it seemed clear that he just accidentally drowned. There were traces of drugs and alcohol found in his system, so he wanted this to be an open and shut case. But then, more disturbing information was released, and it became clear that whatever happened to Stuart was no accident. So Stuart had clear injuries to his face and neck, specifically petechia, which are basically red and brown spots on the skin from broken blood vessels. These injuries indicate asphyxiation, and the medical examiner said that it seemed like Stuart was violently restrained to the point of suffocation, but that's not all they found. The medical examiner then discovered evidence that Stuart was violently SA'd. He had severe injuries to his anus, including internal lacerations and bruising. He also had deep contusions on the back of his shoulders and at the base of his spine, likely from being restrained during the assault. He was also missing skin on the front of his neck, and this suggests that he was bent over a low and abrasive surface, almost like a hot tub wall, which, if you remember, is exactly where Stuart was right before he was found dead. This could suggest that he was asphyxiated from being violently bent over like this. It was very clear by these injuries that whatever happened to Stuart was not consensual, and he would have been in agony. So with all of these new findings, authorities took back the initial claim of accidental drowning, and they changed his manner of death to murder. To be honest though, this is where the story starts to get confusing, and from here on out, I don't know what or who to believe. So Stuart's body was found around 5 a.m., but paramedics weren't called until 5:46 a.m. So what were they doing in that time frame? Well, there's a lot to unpack. Two of the younger girls snuck back into the house, and there they reportedly heard the men talking about rape, which is awfully convenient given Stuart's gruesome injuries. But what's even crazier is that before paramedics arrived, if accurate, Michael did something incredibly bizarre and honestly incriminating. He reportedly started frantically rummaging through his house and took 3 items, which were a pool thermometer, a broken handle to his shed, and one of his hairbrushes, and he wrapped them all up in his clothes and took them to his nearby neighbor's house. And if you remember, 2 of the people at his party were his nearby neighbors, so why he reportedly took those items there, we don't know. Michael's other direct neighbors who were not at the party that night did come forward and said that they heard screaming coming from the home at around 5 a.m. on the night in question. They were never formally questioned, and they don't know whether this was a man or a woman screaming, or if it was a fun party scream or something far more sinister. But I do find this odd. But here's what's infuriating. So right off the bat, police did not treat this as a crime scene. They didn't secure it, they didn't collect any evidence, they didn't even immediately interview the people at the party, who were all still there by the way. They also reportedly didn't even fully search Michael's house. This was all based on the initial assumption that Stuart just accidentally drowned. So by not processing the scene correctly, almost all evidence was immediately destroyed or lost. After the initial pathologist ruled this as an accidental drowning, which was very obviously not the case, 3 other pathologists were brought in to examine his body, and they all confirmed that Stuart was indeed murdered. This kickstarted a massive internal investigation, which was conducted by an outside police force. Many people, including Stuart's family, thought that this case was botched so badly that it had to have been done on purpose. They thought that either there was some sort of corruption within Essex police, or because of how famous and popular Michael was, that he was able to use his influence to possibly and allegedly get away with murder. After the crime, Michael and his boyfriend John split up, and even though he had a lot of pull being a celebrity, his career was really damaged after this all surfaced, but that only lasted for a little while. Michael continued on with his career in TV, and in 2006, he even went on Big Brother UK. It's crazy that this was allowed to happen, and that everyone kind of just thought that it was normal. But at this point, Stuart's dad was furious. He wanted to know what really happened to his son, and police even publicly stated that all 8 people at the party that night know exactly what happened to Stuart. They might have not all killed him, but they all know who did and why. They just weren't saying. All of the partygoers that night kind of banded up together and remained silent on the events that took place that night. But while Michael was on Big Brother, Stuart's dad and lawyer actually tried to serve him papers live on TV in regards to Stuart's death. They were trying to pursue legal action and wanted Michael to be held responsible and be charged with 6 offenses, including murder. Big Brother producers didn't allow this to happen, but this obviously attracted more interest to the case. But ultimately, since police botched the investigation so badly, there was no evidence left tying Michael to the crime, so he was never charged. Over the years, there have been multiple arrests in this case, including Michael's ex-boyfriend, John, and 2 of the other people who were at the party that night. But again, since there was no evidence, none of them were ever charged. They were all released, and to this day, whoever killed Stewart is still out there. There was an inquest into this case, but it came to no conclusion, and they said that Stewart's death was literally a mystery. And although we don't know what exactly happened to him, there is one major theory, and that theory is that someone at the party that night killed him. A lot of people suspect Michael or even his ex-boyfriend because they were throwing the party. But again, I want to make it very clear for legal reasons that there is no evidence tying them to the crime. And I also don't want it to seem like I'm personally blaming or accusing Michael. That's not what I'm trying to do. I know he's here on TikTok, but I'm just simply laying out the facts of this case because it is still unsolved. And I also don't want any of you guys to go and leave him hate comments simply on my behalf. All I know is that drowning does not equal the injuries that Stewart had. Police believe that all 8 people who were at the party that night know exactly what happened. At least 2 of them do. The one who restrained Stewart and the one who SA'd him. And unless they speak up, this case will likely never be solved. Michael went on to live his life and is still a popular UK celebrity to this day. There was a documentary about this case released in 2020 called Barrymore, The Body in the Pool, which is pretty disturbing. And sadly, Stewart's dad died from terminal cancer in 2021 at 76, never knowing what really happened to his son. But it's now been 25 years, and whatever really happened to Stewart that night and why remains a mystery.
Working in a morgue, especially at night, is one of the most terrifying experiences ever. All it takes is one noise and you will be traumatized. It all started when a guy was looking for a summer job, okay, to finance his college. But this motherfucker right here was not looking for a regular job like everybody, like McDonald's for example. No, he was like, nah, let's try something new. Let's work in a morgue. For those who don't know, a morgue is basically where unalive people are sent so they can be identified, cleaned, and be prepared for the burial. Basically a place where you can find a whole lot of unalive people. Now, back to the guy. Why was he looking to work in a morgue in the first place? Well, first of all, he knew this morgue, okay? This morgue was not very far from where he lives. The second thing is, this morgue was hiring people. As they were looking for people who can work at night, basically do night shifts, and this was perfect for the guy since it was summer. The guy didn't waste any time and he immediately went to their office. He started by presenting himself, saying stuff like, "Hi, my name is blah blah blah, I don't live far from here, so I can be here every day." But this is where he started to notice something. You see, while the guy was talking to the employee of the office, he noticed that he was, the employee was extremely positive. Like, bro, how's that bad? Well, the employee was trying to be optimistic and positive for almost everything. It's almost like he was playing a character, and this was worrying the guy. For example, the guy will ask a simple question like, "When will my shift usually end?" And the employee will respond with something like, "Oh, about that, don't worry at all, we will do our best." I assure you that there is nothing to be afraid of. Okay, but that was not my question. I understand that you are hesitant and unsure, but let me reassure. You see what I'm talking about now, how the employee was talking? It feels like you only do this if you have something to hide or something that you don't want to show. Anyways, after a long awkward discussion, the employee made the guy sign a contract and he told him that he can start this weekend. Now, the time finally came and the guy is ready for his first hours of work. His job was very simple. He had to clean some parts of the morgue and get the tools back where they belong. It was basically a cleaning job, so when the bodies arrived, they arrived in a clean space, okay? He did not have a direct contact with them. Spent almost 2 weeks doing this, okay? He low-key liked the job, okay? It paid well and the job was really simple. But everything stopped when this specific thing happened. See, one time while he was working cleaning the morgue, he heard the sound, okay? The problem is, he is supposed to be the only one there. Yes, you heard me well. At the time he was working on, which was very late at night, it was supposed to be him inside the building and the security guard outside the building. Only those two. So when he heard that, he low-key made a smart move. He immediately went outside to talk with the security guard. So he went outside and he met the security guard and told him that he heard the noise. The security guard responded by saying it was probably something that fell. This is where the guy said no. He told him that I know the sound of a tool or something falling. I work there all the time. What I heard is different. Again, the security guard didn't believe him, more like didn't agree with him. He was like, "Buddy, you're working there with unalive people. I've been watching here all the time. Nobody went in." So here the guy didn't have a choice. It was like maybe this was my imagination and he went back inside. Now, when the guy came back inside, he chose to change the room, okay? You know the room where he was initially there? He's not there anymore. If you're asking, bro, what's the purpose of this? Well, he did this for a reason. He chose this room because it was really close from the sound that he heard in the beginning, meaning that if he hears that sound again, he's 100% sure that that was not his imagination. Stayed in this room for a while, not doing anything because it was already clean. He was just focusing, trying to hear if it happens again. And guess what? It did happen again. This time, the sound was a lot louder and it felt like something was being dragged. He heard that noise. As you can imagine, he stressed and he was so scared, okay? He was like, nah, I know damn well that this was not my imagination. Immediately rushed back outside, trying to tell the security guard that that was not my... The security guard was not here anymore. Where the hell did he go? Nobody knows. It means that somebody was making noise inside the building and the morgue is not being secured anymore. The guy saw this, he immediately left this place and never came back again. The office of the morgue tried to call him multiple times, you know, trying to tell him, bro, why are you not coming for your work? But he was not responding. He was not responding because he knew that something was wrong with this place. He just couldn't prove it. And guess what? He was right. After 2 months, this whole morgue was closed for document falsification and forgery. In simple words, this place was never an official morgue. They faked the documents and claimed to be a real one. That was the reason that the authorities gave to justify the shutdown of this place, but the guy believes that there is something deeper, something that had to do with the noise that he heard. If you like this story and like the vibe of this video, you know, basically like scary stuff at night, then make sure to check my YouTube channel. Name on YouTube is Mr. Nice Girls, type it just like this, or you can find it in bio. I made a new video called The Worst Places to Spend the Night In, and it's low-key a banger. I am underrated as hell.